Begin now?
Yes, we have quorum, so we are able to start.
Okay. Hopefully Vice President Patterson can join soon, but let's go ahead for the sake of time. We've got three main things on the agenda today to talk about graduation requirements, the OSCE work on the graduate profile, to talk about how the committee wants to approach literacy. And then we have three resolutions that are before our committee that we need to move along. Kathleen, please feel free to jump in anywhere I go wrong. But I'm just gonna go from the agenda that we worked out. So the first thing we want to do is talk about the graduation requirements. We know that OSCE is doing work on graduate profiles. The leadership asked OSCE about that work. They didn't give any specific details about what they're doing. Andrew said that they are thinking that they would present something to us at a working session later this year. But I don't think that means we need to wait and just be reactive to what they present, since it's an area of interest for us. And I think it is one of those points where we can have an impact on the priorities and direction that schools are taking. So we have if our objective is to determine our goals around this work and possible approaches for this year, what thoughts do you have about what impact you would like for us to have through this work? As our first guiding question, like, do you have any vision for like an outcome that we would come to? And is there anything that's already on your radar for graduation requirements that you think is due for consideration?
So I think when I'm thinking about the graduation requirements, and I don't have any specific like things that I'm saying like should be there right now, but I think Representative Chang in our last meeting really started to like he said something that really hit home for me, and it was talking about like what our priorities are as a district. And I want to make sure that as we think about our graduation requirements, that we're also thinking about what are those priorities that we're having as a district as we move forward. Not just, the things that have been done, but like I think we should like take time to analyze like what are those things that we believe will be necessary for our students to succeed as we move forward. And so like not anything specific right now, but just like taking some time, some intentional time to really just dive through it. So I actually just look forward to taking time on that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that continues to resonate. I think step one, which would be really helpful, depending on staff capacity, is to understand what of our current graduation requirements are federally required versus things that we've added on. And then of the things we've added on, often our approaches just add more to it, but I wonder if there's actually stuff there that is no longer very relevant or appropriate for as Representative Best was saying, are those still the things that we want to prioritize given where we are today? And are there things that we would like to even take off of the plate of schools, teachers, students, to create room for some of the other things that we would like to put in?
Yeah, I am thinking that this, along with the report card, are kind of our ways to do that, to identify what those priorities should be. And I think that's a great first step. Um, what else do you think would be helpful in the process of identifying what those specific things should be? I think that's it. You know, being clear on what's there already and whether it's federally required and what's locally required. Um, and
And locally
then,
legislatively required, perhaps too, might be another third bucket.
okay. Um, and how would you envision like getting engaging the community on this, and like who do we want to engage and when and how? Any strong feelings about that? And like I know some people who are really uh interested in this topic and think that change is really needed. So I know a few of those people in Ward 5, and I don't know if anybody has brought these things to you in your wards already that are kind of primed to give input on this, because I think there's value in going to those people, uh, as well as casting a broader net and hearing from those who maybe haven't been thinking about it already, but would have a lot
It's
of
another
input.
wonky topic to think about, right? I think it's hard without background knowledge
Hmm.
or a relatively heavy lift of, you know, catching folks up to speed to be able to really provide strong, uh, I think, or I guess not strong, detailed feedback, right? I
Yeah,
think we could
yeah,
capture general sentiment of what priorities people have in the broader public, but I think that in many ways the expert engagement is where my mind turns of the the administrators, the experienced teachers, the
yeah.
families who've gone through the system and continue to stay involved, right? I think are the ones that we'll hear the most from um, in this process.
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, I think that people generally might have thoughts or have answers to like what do we want a graduate to know and be. But the details of how to get there, I think you're right, or that's our job to connect those dots and to gather that info from the experts.
I'd love to also add like even like some of the businesses out here, right? Like what do they feel like uh their employee needs, you know what I mean? Coming out
Mhm.
of school. So I think that would be something that's big too. However, I do feel like it will be reflection on maybe like 6 or 7 options. Because like Representative Chang said, there are going to be some that are federally mandated. And so like I feel like we may not have as much flexibility with this as we want to have. And so that's going to be interesting to see. So I think that first step is going to be so important for us if we're talking about how we can make some adjustments, because we may find that, we don't have a lot of wiggle room at all.
Okay. So do you think it makes sense to just kind of hold off on the imagining and designing what we might want to do until we've got that foundation of where
What
we can and can't?
Yep. I think that's the first step. And then once we get that, then we can start to look at what outreach looks like. and then make sure that we're all on the same page with our outreach. So when we're comparing notes, we are comparing notes based off of similar questions. So that, like, let's say if I go to the Ward 6 parent teacher organization, right? I'm approaching them with fairly similar questions that you are within your ward, or that Alistair is within his ward. And so I think that would be really important. But also, yes, so our like parent facing orgs, I would love to do some like power mapping, to be honest with you. Like, I think a lot of times with our outreach where we say, all right, we're gonna do this, but like if we do some power mapping, or just mapping in general, like say, all right, who are the people that we really want to talk to, and then figure out how we go about that for each ward.
Kathleen, do you have thoughts on starting this, getting the layout of the different categories of requirements?
I think that makes sense, to kind of make sure everyone is aware of like what the requirements are versus what's optional versus what we are able to change. I have some research done on what the requirements are, but I don't have the answers right now to all the questions that you guys just asked, which I think are important, so I can look into those. And I think the power mapping is a good idea as well, so we can be really intentional about outreach. So I think those are two sort of initial steps that we can be taking to kind of guide as we are also waiting for OSSI to give us more information. And then just one other thing for graduation requirements, it is partially like X number of credits of English, X number of credits of math, of science, etc. But there's also sort of other related questions when we talk about graduation requirements in terms of like, the last time they looked at them, they had recommendations around the number of service hours, or they had recommendations around like other sort of related topics. And so thinking a little bit more expansively about what this conversation could be, I think is something we can also kind of include in that initial research.
No, I'm sorry, go for it.
I was just going to add that I know of at least one legislative push to add to that, being Councilmember Henderson wanting FAFSA application to be a requirement, and there may be other proposals out there, and it would be helpful to have those on our radar as well.
Do we also have like a small like printing budget for like what I mean by this is like, let's say if we go out in our community, and obviously we can get some feedback from our meetings and we're taking notes, but I wonder if like some type of like survey or something along those lines would be helpful. But if we can like put it on a flyer with a QR code, like do we have a budget for something?
Yes, we do have sort of a amount of money to be spent on the committees through like research or whatever it is the committee wants to do. And that would be something the committee would propose to leadership, just to like make sure that it's in the budget and we're like balancing the different ones. And then sort of depending on what it is, and if you want to use it for this, you also have your individual constituent engagement funds for your wards. So we could talk about if there's something we want to print, whether it comes from one of those places. That's definitely doable.
All right, thank you.
And I would just add to that, I think the more, like if it is flyers or some type of handout, I think the more specific you can be with what you want to do, the better, because that gives us a better idea of like which vendors are available and what they charge, things like that.
Okay.
So let's start with the work of mapping out the existing requirements, which are federal, which are legislative, which are Aussie, and any current proposals for changes. And then can we have that ready for our next committee meeting, Kathleen, or is that too soon?
Yeah, I think that, yes.
Okay, and I can work with you on that. And then from there, we can get further into our engagement strategies. Does that sound good? All right, so let's move on then to how this committee is going to approach literacy. And Representative Chang, you have well earned the honor of having the responsibility for getting us up to date on where things are, and I'm interested, to see where you think the next steps for the board are on keeping this moving.
Yes, great. And I have a BSA subtitle that Councilmember Pinto is working on to change and make an ask for additional funding and legislate pieces of this that I'd appreciate the folks on this committee to send feedback on. Thank you, Kathleen, for already taking a look, and for I know that the council members already incorporated your very quick turnaround feedback, and so where we are. We made 4 recommendations from the task force, and already the task force there, our community members were telling us that those 4 recommendations weren't quite enough. They're already falling short of the recommendations themselves. Were already a lighter version of what states like Mississippi and Tennessee did. And in the proposed budget, the only piece that's fully funded from it is recommendation 4, which is high quality instructional materials, which if you talk to any experienced reading instructor, instructional coach will say, just having a strong curriculum does not mean anything really if the reading instructor doesn't actually know what to do with it, or know why it was designed in the way that it is, or know how to weed out the parts of it that are not good, because apparently there's no curriculum that is perfect, right? And so in many ways, I think my biggest fear right now is that we're doing this piecemeal rather than altogether, which we have not seen work in other states. So, and we're doing this now at a time when, because more states have been trying to do this piecemeal, kind of taking pieces of the Mississippi model, we're seeing that those states are not getting the outcomes that Mississippi achieved. And what I don't want to happen is that then there is a sort of another kind of the simplified response that is dangerous is, well, then these types of investments also don't work, right? When in reality, I think what the research is showing is that it does work if you do it together. It does not work if you're doing them separately. And so chronology really matters. Just to catch folks up on where we are with the rest, and part of our concern, right, which is, yes, I'm very happy that Aussie has a 25-hour training through TNP that is a version, right? It's the content is great. The actual delivery, though, of a online workshop is untested. We do not know whether that is effective. I think we all know what it's the difference between taking an online course versus an in-person with coaching and back and forth and some kind of dynamic relationship with someone who you can ask questions to, versus kind of sitting on one end and having information flow more one way without any kind of exchange. And so to me, the real I have a real concern that won't get most teachers all the way, right? And so, and it's great that we have that as an option, and I think it's a great place to start, right? And so, what I would appreciate folks on this committee's help with is taking a look at the new version of this draft BSA subtitle. And I know this is a really quick turnaround, but I know that the council member is meeting with DCPS on Monday. If we could have some feedback on it by Monday, that'll be tactically helpful. But at any point before Wednesday would still be helpful to make sure that we're moving this forward with your feedback. So let's say that the major pieces of this go through, and one of the main pieces is that all reading instructors in the certain grade bands that were laid out by the task force would be mandated to have taken the training, which at this point would be the 25-hour course. It would add some additional funding for coaching, which I have been told from multiple folks from other states that have done this well and seen good results, that actually the coaching piece was the most important element of all 4 recommendations. So have been really pushing hard on making sure that we have instructional coach support. But let's say that we get some of these pieces through. I think what I would like this committee's to really focus on is continuing to find ways to fill out the gaps that are left, and advocating for organizing around, whether that's research, roundtables, publications, convenings, just having individual conversations with the decision makers in other agencies, that the risk, right, of trying to do any of these things in a piecemeal way, and take this next then chunk of time after the budget is out to continue to find other ways to either prepare for the next budget year, or to find other smart ways that we can take the available resources that we have to fill in some of the gaps.
Do you have any sense of why the 4th recommendation got funded and the others didn't?
So here's what the shortcut path has been in other states. It's been fund a curriculum that is much more scripted. And it's not the same. We won't see the same results if we do it that way, but I do think it is a more and more common proposal that I'm seeing in other parts of the country.
Okay, so
Alistair, do you have a sense of, I know you talked about how the 4 recommendations were good, but were not like enough, or were not sort of the extent of what the most successful places are doing. Do you have a sense of what those other things are? We maybe
One
don't
of the
need to
big ones
discuss it
is
now,
ages,
like,
right. So
Okay.
the grade bands. So there was a heavy push from educators that I spoke to that was not included in these recs. That was, why can't we provide this training for pre-K, right? So as I was speaking with reading instructors in the city, they saw a glaring omission in earlier grades, as well as, and our colleague Dr. O'Leary will be the first to say that high school teachers even should have this training, because too many of our students are attending high school without these reading skills and very few high school instructors have learned how to teach reading, right? So I think one of the big ones, Kathleen, is actually just making sure that we're thoughtful about who needs to be engaged, and what grades. I've just emailed folks the draft, and yeah, really appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, I heard that as well, from the earlier ages, being so important. So we can definitely do give input in the short term on the BSA subtitle. And it sounds like, making that argument, as persuasively and forcefully as possible, that all these parts need to be working together, in order for us to be successful. Really important.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. So, Kathleen, do you have any more questions to help kind of move us towards, envisioning what the work over the course of the year would look like on that? Or, Alistair, do you have any specific things that we should look to, or do we need to just kind of wait and see what happens with the budget and then adjust?
I think a lot of it hinges on what we're able to get through in this budget cycle. And so yeah, would appreciate if we could regroup and then build a plan when we know.
Yeah, I think it sounds like we're going to need to wait on some of those specifics, but I think we can keep thinking now. I mean, not now, maybe in this meeting, but now, like maybe between now and the next meeting, about, I think we can assume, unfortunately, that like not everything we want is going to happen. And so what would be our next steps from there so that we're prepared, when we can kind of like fill in what is missing in that blank so that we're ready to start that advocacy right away. I don't have an answer for what that is right now, but I think that's something that we can just start before we know what the final budget is.
I like that framing. And actually, Kathleen, if I may get your take on, if since you've seen the draft already, what do you think is, just general take on the subtitle, what's missing, where do we go from there? Given that you are, you actually have been a practitioner, you've done the policy side and the actual implementation side as well.
I think in terms of like I think it follows generally what the task force recommended. I know not all the task force members necessarily agreed about every single recommendation, because there was kind of like consensus building, and my experience teaching was in ESL partially for fourth grade for the most part, but also for middle school. And that was a really huge struggle, not having structural literacy training and having to kind of cobble that together myself. Because, we had newcomers who came, or just students who didn't have the basics of the foundational skills they needed to be successful. And I didn't feel like I was necessarily equipped to do that for the middle school students, because that wasn't what I was trained to do with them. And so I definitely agree about the age. And I think that one of the things that was discussed during the task force was whether for ESL teachers it should be K-5 or K-12. And I think I advocated in that meeting for K-12. So I definitely think that like expansion that you mentioned is important. I would have to think about what else.
Is the existing training, the 25-hour training, is it applicable to those different grade bands, or is it just for those the narrower?
And that's the piece that I think is often missing. Yeah, it's the theory. so that's applicable to everybody. But what the other state leaders have told me that have, you know, been implementing this is, of course, theory is not gets you a lot of the way, but not all of it, and it's very helpful to work with somebody who has applied that theory in your specific context before, so you're not trying to recreate the wheel.
Yeah, I think especially for we talked about this for like older ESL students who like are learning English and it's their second language. And so like a lot of the books and materials that we have seem very childlike. And that is something that is very disengaging for older students to be like, I'm reading a baby book. But like it is like the sort of like decoding level that they're at. And so I think there are those kinds of differences that it's important to attend to when thinking about older students. And that would be like materials, but with the training as well.
So as I work with Kathleen kind of between meetings to start filling out the work plan, Alistair, we may just check in with you as we do that. So that's all right.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I mean, especially for folks on this committee, if you're willing to write your council members and your at-large members to continue asking for them to support for this year, making sure that we're funding all 4 recommendations from the task force, that would be, I think, it would be timely.
Okay. All right, thanks, Alistair. So we've got a little over 20 minutes left in the hour to turn to the resolutions that we have before us. I think I'd like to start with the AI resolution, if that's okay. And just start by asking if there are any concerns with where it is at the moment, any things that we need to resolve.
I think just a
Before moving
general
to the-
comment first about all 3 of the resolutions.
Okay.
Now there's a lot of like comments in there, and most of them we're trying to make sure we're really focused and specific about what we're asking, especially of other agencies. Because if we have kind of like a general request that the mayor and council support this, support dual enrollment, and we aren't asking something specific of them, I feel like it's likely that nothing's gonna happen. And so making sure we have a very specific and targeted and strategic ask for these people, especially since in a lot of these instances we don't have statutory authority, it's like a request that we're making. That kind of specificity is really helpful in terms of that, getting those external people on board, and also making sure that we can make sure that there is like staff and like financial capacity to be doing the things you want to do. And so it's not like we're overcommitting, we're setting ourselves up for success, like internally and externally. And so that's where like a lot of the comments on all of these resolutions are coming from.
Yeah. I think as we look at the AI resolution, one of the biggest ones is like, who's responsible for setting up the task force? Is that going to be SBOE? Is that going to be OSSI? And so, Alistair, I wanted to ask you a question. Like, when you were doing your task force, like, how did you all set that up?
It was another BSA subtitle to the budget that funded OSSI $150,000. Don't quote me on that. To hire a consultant to lead the task force.
Alistair, was the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant part of that work as well?
No, it was not.
Okay.
Alistair, pros and cons of that approach?
Well, let's see. I mean,
Fair.
I mean, the good part, right? The glass half full look is we got every agency agreed on where we need to go. Like what actually needs to happen next. We're all in agreement. We're all on the same page. We've all put our stamp and stamp of approval on it. The challenge, of course, is, and I think that's actually really, of course, that's a huge piece of this. And I think that'll be even harder with math, where there is no science of math in the same way yet. So it's much more, we really need to get on the same page. And something as nebulous as AI, I think that's actually the bulk of the work, actually, to get started. So in many ways, you know, did the actual recommendations change? No, right? Like it was mostly getting everyone on the same page around, right? The research was out there, and I'm very grateful that, you know, the task force was able to go through the research together and really, you know, make sure we were all on the same page about the research and how we implement that in DC and customize it to DC. All of those things are great. And even if you do it this way, it's not like it's going to necessarily be funded and be implemented, right? So
I guess that's the question. Like, would we have any funding to support like an outside organization running a task force? And if
Like,
not, then that would mean it would definitely be us or OSSI, correct?
so you're saying we, the state board?
Yes, sorry.
I mean, you just said it cost her $150,000 for
Yep.
the literacy one. Yeah, that's more than our committee budget.
what do
That's,
we have, Kathleen? And I, you know, certainly I think if we took pieces of it, it wouldn't be. I mean, there's a lot of ways to run a task force without that. I also think, though, that if we run it, it'll have a different legitimacy than if OSSI does.
tell me more.
Yeah,
Well,
different in what way?
well, uh, if it ultimately is the mayor who needs to fund what happens next, that's what I mean. It's you know, that's different if the recommendations come from within a mayoral agency.
Yeah, I think one of the things that so there are a few organizations that have started to do this work and do it really well across the United States. And like I've developed a relationship with one. It's AI for Equity with their CEO. He's been amazing. We've like I kind of talk to him about everything as it relates to like the AI work. And I know that like it if regardless of if it's like they're running it, we are running it, or OSSI is running it, like I think that they need to be like in the forefront of this work. Because they're one of the few organizations that have done this work across school districts in the United States as it relates to AI. And so for me, I know I left that kind of blank in there. Like the question was asked, whose responsibility is it? And it looks like we don't really have the funding for it. So I think regardless if it's us or OSSI, I think my biggest thing, and I don't know how to put this in the resolution. I'll figure that out. But I think my biggest thing is I want us to do this with AI AI for Equity, because they are like one of the two organizations doing this work across the United States.
And I really trust you on that. And that sounds great. I think my question is more macro level around, you know, if we're backwards mapping for end of this year, let's say, or this next budget year, by next budget year, if we're making an ask about AI, what questions do we need to have answered, right? Or is it, you know, maybe it's actually us convening roundtables, which, you know, I know I poked fun at in the bylaws and I use all the time now, as a proxy for us making a convening. But if it's just, you know, if it's actually more about thought leadership than it is about making a policy recommendation to start? Or is it actually, we want to have a policy recommendation that we want legislated and funded for next year?
I think that it is, so right now, and I can send this to you all. I have to go through my email real quick. Honestly, a lot of the work is done. Hold on, AI toolkit playbook. So excuse me. Let me find this. Once I
Yeah,
find,
while you're looking, oh,
yeah,
sorry. Just gonna say, it seems like there might be other options for ways to engage them and get their input in a meaningful way to shape things for the coming budget year. Do you see other ways? I mean, like not necessarily a task force in the same mold as the literacy one, but a different way.
yeah, I think that I think it is going to be a little different. But I do believe that much, and I just shared this one, this for with you. If it's in the chat, everyone, feel free to take some time to check it out. But it talks about everything from like the ethical considerations, change management, communicating with stakeholders, your task force, your organizational structures, how do you get buy-in, then developing your policy, evaluating it, like all this work, honestly, it is so thoughtful and thorough. A lot of it's been done, and it's like it's taking that information, obviously making it our own with with our needs, but then implementing it throughout our organizations. If we get the task force to agree that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, one thing to that I'd love to poke their or pick their brain about is how, right? Is it, and who is it, how many of these are school board developed versus legislated by legislated versus just implemented by the right? Is it, I mean, ultimately, is the ask to the mayor or to the council or to DCPS or to the individual LEAs or OSI?
That's a good question.
Right, like who, I like this, right? Develop student generative AI usage policy. Who in our ecosystem is the right one to do that? And how do we take on one of these and actually get it all the way through? But I like the steps here. You're right. It is an interesting playbook and certainly lays out the biggest questions for us.
Yeah, I just sent another one, which is like the strategic planning document. This was like for 2004, 2005. But yes, you're right. The who, like who is the one who is gonna like implement all of those things? I think that's one of the questions that we probably would ask within the task force. Like who's responsible for this? Like what are our goals in this task force? If our goal is a policy, that's cool. We would have a policy, but I think it's also how do you implement it? And I think that's what makes this unique, because there are components that talk about policies, but it's also talking about, well, look, people are questioning, how do you do this work? And they're like, all right, well, these are the ways that we've seen this work successfully. And it literally goes through all the different steps. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
So is it a matter of having OSI develop capacity to be the repository and resource for the LEAs, so that we have like a state level guidance or a state level
Yeah.
expertise, because I'm there's always a push when it comes to like, is this something that's going to be mandated for all LEAs to do, versus is this something we really need to encourage and have ready when the LEAs are persuaded or convinced to buy in?
Yeah, I guess my challenge is, I mean, just like you were saying with one of the other things, like, you know, well, it wasn't you, but I would be worried that, if there isn't something that's saying like this is what we need you to do, that it won't get done. We'll have all this information about how you can implement this stuff, what our policies are, how do you get buy-in, how do you do all these other things, and ultimately we don't have anything. Ideally for me, what I would love to have is actually a set of standards that are incorporated within the existing standards that we have, as it relates to like the AI, along with a policy, with resources that we can provide to the schools on how to implement it. So I think the playbook and the toolkit, like, man, that's awesome, right? Because it's already there for the schools. So that could be part of the resources. And so then it gets to, all right, well, now we need the policy. Now we need to also make sure that we're setting up training, and so that's that. I think those are the big things right there.
Brandon, I think reading through one more time, it looks like it also lays part of this out. I mean, in a way, right? Part one is make sure everyone knows, right? So it's getting the word out, using our bully pulpit power to just make sure that this is top of mind for the key stakeholders, maybe doing a convening, whether this is and that could take many forms, right? And then I think moving to part two, it's asking the rest of the other agencies, what are you already doing on this? How are you thinking about this? What are the problems you want to solve? Creating this organizational structure of like, how do we solve this problem, right? And who, right? Because at the end, we've done this before. We've published studies, right, that are, I think, fantastic on teacher retention that no one implemented. I don't want to do that.
Right.
And so, how do we actually make sure that we're thinking about? I think this playbook is really interesting, and I actually think we're at step 1 and 2, Brendan, towards that goal. Not quite yet at what you're saying. I think is 3 and 4.
No.
I'm not sure we're there yet.
Wait, which part you said? Which part? Can you explain?
I think we're at part 1 and 2, which is share these examples, what they're calling exemplars, building the right foundation, getting the right stakeholders to have this conversation together and get their existing take on it and what kind of challenges and problems they're trying to solve. That might take form as a survey, that might take form as another convening, right? Before we get to what I think you're saying, which is develop that policy, which here is part 3.
Oh,
right?
well, yeah, I think the policy comes from within the task force, right? Like, I think that, yes, I think that there are, I think you're spot on with other components. But I believe that I believe that the policy comes from the task force. I think that the task force will have a few things that at the end they're going to say, these are our final, like, these are our outcomes. These are the things that we want as a result of the task force. 1, a policy. 2, resources. 3, something else. And so, yeah, I don't think that we are there yet, but I think that that's one of the things that happens from within, the task force once we, get started with developing that.
Brandon,
Brandon? Oh, go ahead.
just a quick temperature check on your expectations for the timing of these, like, I guess for each of the three. Like, my feeling is that we're maybe closest on the AI to having the resolution ready, but just want to know what your hopes and expectations are there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think we're. I think we have a lot more work to do on the math right now. As far as AI, I would love to get this started sooner than later. I would love to start having conversations with Asi, like immediately, to see like, hey, like this is what we're trying to do, and like they, well, I mean, they know it's coming down the pipe, but I know that now things are kind of changing because of staffing situations. But I don't want to look up and say, man, we really dropped the ball because we really missed this, time to get kind of, I don't think we're ahead, like, but I don't want to say, I don't want us to continue like to push it back to a place where, we're getting started on it over the summer or anything like that.
So this kind of does relate to my question actually, which was around the conversations, what conversations you've had with Aussie so far around this, because I know they had mentioned previously that they were already internally looking into AI. I don't know if you have any sort of sense of what
Yeah, so I
that
mean,
is or the extent of it.
yeah, so I put it on their radar. I had a meeting with Dr. Grant. Um, I kind of put that on their radar. And so um they were super excited about it. They got energetic about it, and we've had some, one-off conversations about the work. They've been really supportive in this work, because they know that this is very important as well. So yes, they know that it's coming down. As far as what their capacity looks like right now, I'm not sure right now, because I haven't had any conversations about this since the announcement was made, of Dr. Grant leaving. And so I don't know what that looks like right now. But I do know that this is one of the things where, you know, even though we're saying, I know this is something else added, I think this is one of the few times where we have so many resources where it becomes like a situation where we're organizing our approach as opposed to creating it, if that makes sense.
What do you think is the immediate next step, Brandon, to be able to move this? I think it's the pathway is not super clear to me, but it sounds clear to you operationally. What do we need to do to move this forward after the resolution?
Yeah, I think that we would have to reach out to Asi. We'd have to have a couple meetings with them. And maybe honestly even before. But we have a few meetings or a meeting with them.
Are those information gathering meetings, or do we have an ask for them in those meetings?
It's a great question. If we're saying that we would like to do this together, or if we're saying that we want them to do it, then it's an ask and information gathering. So information gathering is like, hey, we have a ton of resources, for you. This is they already know why it's important. We've already had those conversations. They're already on board for that. I believe that we are going to ask if we're doing this together, then I guess that's the thing. It would be how often do we create resolutions asking another organization to lead something else? Like, is that something that we've done a lot of in the past?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think like I feel like I know you don't are not in favor of delaying this. I think it's important to make sure that we're on the same page with OSSI about what the ask is, because I think sometimes what happens is if our asks are not specific enough, or if they don't align with what OSSI wants to do, they can just not do it. And so I think making sure we kind of have those ducks in a row, which, or at least start those initial conversations to say with them, like, we've sent other agencies resolutions before. We've published them and say, like, hey, does this sound okay to you? Like, generally, and you don't have to obviously take every recommendation that they have, but I think making sure that, like, there's nothing that they'll say, oh, we actually are already doing that, or we actually, that may be out of our capacity to do at this time, and just make sure that that's happening beforehand. Would you be open to doing something like that?
Possibly, yeah. My next question is, I know I asked if we had like a budget, right? And I'm not asking for like $150,000 budget or anything like that. But do we have any type of a budget that would support hiring a group like a nonprofit, like basically AI for Equity, honestly, or another group, whatever. There's one more group. Do we have something where we could offer something?
Yeah, we have a budget that's like about, I want to say maybe 60,000, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, for both committees to share.
Oh, okay.
So,
And so
yeah,
I think it would really depend, and like Jen said, making sure we have the specifics about what the ask is.
Yeah, I mean, because if we were able to get like AI for Equity, I haven't talked any type of price or anything like that. But if we were able to get them to convene it, like I've sat in on their meetings. They've done I've sat in on a couple of their task force with KIP and a couple other public schools. And I'm just seeing how they've like worked together with these organizations. It's been like a really, really good flow. Um, I know that they could like really do a great job at this. And then as I'm on the NASB Ed Tech board right now, they're working with another group as well. And so I guess between those two groups, maybe it's like, hey, we have a little bit of money, not a lot, but would you be able to convene a task force over this amount of time with these players doing these few things? Like, so maybe that's one thing too, like figure out what we have that's available, figure out if
The homework there, Brendan, that just to throw into is not just getting a quote from them, but also I think it's the individual outreach to DME, OSSI, Council, PCSB,
I agree.
and individual other kind of key decision makers to, I mean, before we bring them in, to make sure they even show up to that meeting, right? And what they would do with the results, right? If we have I think if we're convening it, I worry that the attendance won't be particularly high. And so how we actually design this in a way that is solving a problem for those stakeholders so that they actually show up would be, I think, the homework.
All right, so that's it to do. That makes sense.
So you're still undecided, Brandon, on whether we would convene or we would be asking OSSI to convene?
If I want this to be as successful as possible. So if the consensus is like if OSSI is the best to do it, then by all means, like let's see if OSSI would do it, right? I just want it to work, So I'm not like, oh, we need to do it or they need to do it. But I do think that they're also like and this is something that we might want to start thinking about like later on, right? When we talk about the legitimacy of the SBOE, like I feel like we're often, asking people to do the work when I think that we also could add legitimacy to ourselves by doing the work. And that's just something that we can think about for later. But
I mean, I think it's something that we could think about now if you want to, like, do some of that initial research and like get, all these ducks in a row so we have like the best
Brandon,
pitch to give to whatever this group is, and like making sure we have this really clear ask, because to me it still doesn't sound clear who you want to do certain things. And I think we 100% need to have that before the resolution goes.
So you're,
right.
yeah,
Can I ask a question real quick?
yeah.
Mhm.
I've tried to listen in and everything like that, so I had all the components. Have you had any conversation? I hear you've had conversation with Ozzy, and we also know that they are in leadership transition. Has this been raised at all with DME or with Clara or anybody from that office, seeing that you're also asking for a little bit of a money situation? Has there been any connection or conversation with them at all, is my question,
Not yet.
with DME?
Not yet.
And I raised that question for this, Representative Best, for the simple fact with the transition and stuff like that, and us wanting to do that, we want to get this work prioritized from what I'm hearing from. And when it comes down to budget and prioritizing things at this particular time, coming out of a meeting recently with the DME, it's going to require them to buy in it and then stay consistent with us as a state board. So I'm kind of suggesting that if you're going to hire someone or do anything like that, that seems to me more like a DME level type of thing. Although we keep Aussie involved, but it sounds more like we would like to kind of, start making this a priority as well.
Cool.
Make sense?
Yeah, I guess like you all said, it comes down to like who we're saying that, we want to do the work. Who are we saying that we want to lead the task force? I think the ask is for me is to create a task force on this.
Okay.
So that's one. And then it's who is leading it. So Jock, you're saying that sounds more like a DME thing versus an Aussie thing. Right now, what I'm saying is I don't have the answer as far as right now. Like if we're going with DME job,
Brandon, just to clarify one thing there, I think there's a huge distinction between who leads the work and who
Right.
owns the work. I actually
Right.
think we are.
Thank you.
We through you are already leading the work, sir.
yeah,
Right.
Right. But actually, if we're thinking about what I would want us to do is backwards map. What does ultimate success look like? In my case, Aussie needed to own it to actually get it done, right? At the end, because it is a decision and implementation that they will ultimately need to own. I think in this scenario, we're leading the work by having this conversation and thinking about what players to pull in at what time and in what chronology, right? The actual ownership though is there's no world where we implement this,
Right.
and
That's
so
correct.
when I think of when you think about who actually owns the implementation, I think that's a different question than
That
leading this
is.
stage of the work.
That is, and I thank you for that clarification. And I want to make sure, Representative Chang, when you did your task force, did not OSSI kind of like put that, not OSSI, but DME put that together? Was that DME
They
or
were
OSSI?
in. I mean, the number of conversations I had with each of these agencies in order for kind of us to even design the right iteration, time frame,
Right.
like how the task force was put together, what was the main question, what would each of the sessions actually address, what would the final products be. I mean, that was the work of the early, before the actual task force was launched, right? Which with each of the stakeholders.
Right. And I think that needs to be redone for AI, because there is a money component to it, and we're asking people to help out with it, and we're going to need their input, because while we lead it, at the end of the day, they're going to have to implement it.
So, Brandon, I hear you that we don't want to delay this much further. I'm also gathering that there are more conversations that have to happen before we know exactly who we want to identify in this resolution to own the work. we have just over 2 weeks before the May 15th public meeting. So what does that mean, Jen?
Brandon, and I think the thing to clarify is, in my mind, you're taking lead on this, but of course you're not doing this alone, right? So what help do you need? What help are you looking for at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the stuff we've been talking about today, right? Like, I think you've had experience, taking an idea, creating a task force with, the different organizations. So, the steps that you took. Maybe if you could share like the steps, or for the things that aren't clear, in our notes, like someone, just shares like, hey, these are the things that we need. Like, I'll make sure I can, kind of get some of this stuff done. But yeah, like, I mean, I think like as a committee, like I think we all need to be like thought partners on this and figure out like what's the best approach. And if it is going to Aussie, then okay, so is it Jock that reaches out? Is it me that reaches out? If it's DME, like let's figure out like our action plan. And I can do some of that for sure. But I think maybe our approach is like how do we go at this is the big thing.
Yeah,
If
Brandon,
you're willing
for
to put a
our,
first draft
oh, go ahead.
together and run it by us, I think tell us what the deadline is to review it and put our comments in or fill in sections.
I think there were a lot
happy
of
to do so.
questions. I think there were a lot of questions and statements that were made. Are we going to have notes where?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be helpful.
I don't know if you guys can hear me like clickety clacking on my keyboard. But I am taking notes, yes, and this is recorded.
Okay, cool. So if you share like my next steps, I'll make sure that I can share it with the team. Obviously, it doesn't look like we'll be able to make it by the 15th. We may or may not. But I'm just gonna do the best that I can to get this back to you all. So I want to focus on this one, and then after that, I'm gonna focus on the math one, which is I think a lot further away from the AI right now. So let me know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I
Okay,
can
well-
send out these the kind of questions that we're hearing in the notes, and then I would also be open to like setting up a meeting if we wanted to kind of start that strategizing
I would love
together,
that.
maybe like later next week.
I would love that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, we can.
And that one,
Yeah,
Brandon, I
if we
know
do have,
more
like-
about content wise than AI. I think I'm really really defer to you on what we do and what success looks like for the AI topic. On the math front, Kathleen, is the process that we as a committee need to agree that we move forward a proposal that we have a math panel for the broader group to consider, or is that just something that we figure out at the next working session?
That would just be at the working session.
Okay.
I mean, you guys can like get
So we
together and
still
sort of
would like to
strategize
propose that,
you're gonna
right?
Yeah,
pitch and
definitely.
like do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The committee
And
doesn't.
that's good too, because then we can have our resolution after the panel. So
for math.
Yeah, for math. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's make sure that the AI resolution does not go past June. If we can't make it May,
I agree.
and I think we can, I don't want to give up and say that we can't yet. I think it's basically just that we need to know exactly who we're asking to do what. So if we're able to,
As a group though, right now, like, can we see what we agree, like who is the right group to push forward, like for that? It sounds like there was a conversation of Aussie and then a conversation of DME. Do you all know like what, like
in my head, it's this. It's we need to be first information gathering from Aussie, DME, PCSB, DCPS, and I think those are the key players, but tell me who you think we're missing. And each of them we need to ask, what are you already doing around AI? Who have you hired someone to think about this? Is anyone on your team thinking part-time about this? And or, are you an ostrich with your head in the sand right now? Which is also a really helpful data point, right?
You're right.
But
You're right.
if
You're
there is
absolutely right.
who is the person on your team who would be thinking about this, right? How far have they gotten? What are the challenges that you've faced? And then I think we move
Exactly.
to work with that person to say, okay, if we were to convene a group to work on this, one, would you attend? Two, who else should attend? Three, what are the questions that we could
Mhm.
answer that would help you the most? What are the challenges that you're facing that are around this topic right now? And I think, just very macro level stuff to get us started to see, maybe we're all asking the same question. Maybe none of us are asking the same question. Maybe no one is thinking about this, which is why I think it's been so hard. I mean, if that is, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, Brandon, if that's the case, which is part of why I think it's been so hard for you to actually move this forward, because I don't know who within these agencies is taking lead within their own agencies on this, right? So without knowing who we'd even bring to a committee or a task force, or even be a part of the conversation, it shouldn't just be the intergovernmental affairs person, right? Which is where they may put you when you have that conversation. But I do think we're at the stage of first information gathering.
I
I
agree with
agree. Go ahead, Brandon.
No, that was it. I agree.
I
I-
agree, and I think it has to either be DME or OSSI for implementation purposes. Like if we want it to be all schools, it would need to be one of those two, but finding out which one of those two is best positioned, and maybe the leadership transition is a factor in that, or maybe not. I don't know.
I wonder if the mayor back in February signed her like an executive order to adopt AI strategic plan, to create an AI strategic plan. I put that in the chat. I think this would align with the DME because it's directly under her and it aligns with her strategic plan. And we're just saying, hey, like we're implementing this work in education, and we know that you are already working on this throughout the city. We want to do this in education. Let's make it happen.
Okay, for
Right, so
sake of time, I feel like we have
thank
our
you.
next steps for this. And it sounds like we were okay tabling the math resolution. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes, okay. We still have one other resolution
Yeah,
on
so
our agenda.
dual enrollment, yeah.
Right.
Vice President Patterson.
Yes, I think you have most everything that you need, Kathleen, at this particular point. But you did mention at the top of the conversation about resolutions that there was no specific ask that you saw in that particular resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, so I can send you this again, but me and Jen, and I think Robert, you went in as well and put in some comments in the version in SharePoint.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at those, but it was just some of those questions about getting the specifics. Okay.
I have not. I can look at that and everything like that. I kind of just came to the meeting. I had not reviewed you guys' notes and recommendations, but I can do that. And then I don't think they're like real hard ones, if I'm understanding this. It's just more or less just crafting what the actual ask is. We should be okay to keep it moving forward. Is that correct? Once we decide on those?
I think, it's not up to me, but
Are we
I
able
think
to
it's-
vote? Are we able to vote to move a resolution out of committee between now and Wednesday?
Or you could, Chairman, you could say that you're ready to move it forward pending revisions for an ask or something to that extent with revisions.
Okay, and to bring it before the working session? The
Yes,
full
sir.
committee?
Correct.
All right, we can do that, and I would also say, like, there was some relevant testimony at the last public meeting
Uh-huh.
around that. Like I asked, like, what are the barriers to participation? And there was a lot of commentary about people not knowing it, students not knowing about it, and also how they weigh dual enrollment versus AP. So
Right.
there may be something to add from that as well.
Okay.
But I'm willing to have us move it pending pending those revisions to bring to the full board.
I believe you would have to have some members also. Second the motion.
Is there a
or-
motion? Or can I move to do that? I move to do
I don't
that.
know if I can move it as a vice because I'm not technically a committee member.
Yes.
No, you
Yes.
are.
You are.
Representative
I
Patterson, you
am.
are.
Am I? Am I? Okay,
Yeah.
I am. Okay. I'm part of every committee, I guess. So I think there's been a motion. I'll second then. How about that?
Okay, so moved by Representative Chang, seconded by VP Patterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Were there others?
I
Come off mute.
Representative Chang?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, so we can move it to the working session with, we'll need some revisions to just make those asks clear. And then, Brandon, I would be happy to do more lifting on the math. You know, just so it can start moving parallel to the AI work.
appreciate that.
As am I. I'm willing to help on the math as well.
Okay,
Awesome.
Because-
Yeah.
because
Thank
we'll
you.
need some of the same conversations for that as well.
Okay, cool. I appreciate the teamwork, you all.
Yeah. Kathleen,
And
anything
just
else we need to do?
last point about the
Sorry.
AI thing topic. I'm not. I actually don't think that necessarily means we don't move the resolution forward. It might actually equip Brandon with more umph if he has the resolution when he goes to the meeting. Like, hey, this is a really high priority for the board, which is why I'm now authorized by my colleagues to come have this conversation with you. I'm not just Brandon, the rep. I'm Brandon,
The committee.
speaking on behalf
And-
of the committee and the whole board.
Yes, that's strategically, that's smart.
I
But
love
what do we need to leave blank in order
Right.
to do
There,
that?
I
And
think
what-
there's some things we leave blank, right? But I don't have it. Yeah. Brendan, do you see what I'm trying to get at?
I do. I wholeheartedly, and I understand and agree.
Where we take out some of the specific asks, perhaps, but rather, you know, this is a really top priority for the board and for DC, and because, you know, it's inevitable for our students, for our staff, for how, you know, everyone gets trained, for how everyone should, what they should learn, how they should learn, how we actually think about classrooms, right? All of that is still relevant. And maybe it's just saying that we prioritize this as a topic.
I like it.
So
So
before the literacy task force was created, the state board had a resolution around like literacy priorities and like things like that
Mhm.
to show the board's commitment, but like not having necessarily just saying like X, Y, and Z are things that are important for, you know, literacy instruction or things that we need to decide as a city, but it didn't have maybe those answers in
Yep.
it. So
Kathleen, is that something you could help us edit?
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so maybe this is the first of 2 resolutions that we will do.
I agree with that, especially I think some of these resolved clauses currently in the AI resolution about what kind of policies the task force would recommend, things like that could go into a later version. So paring this version back a little bit and keeping it a little bit more focused on state boards, priorities and vision about AI in the District of Columbia, as well as our fellow agencies.
Would you all be able to help me with that?
Yeah.
Kathleen and I can both help you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so if we're confident that we can move in that direction, we can move a resolution, a pared down resolution to the working session, right? Any objections to that?
No objection here.
Okay, well, I will move that we do that. Move this pending revisions that pare down the specific ask to give you something more weighty to say that this is the direction that we want to go in, and we need to narrow it in for a subsequent resolution.
Mr. Chair, I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Yeah, yep.
All right, I feel better about that we will be moving something that makes clear, what we're moving towards. Given that we do still need to do some work to know exactly what to ask for in the next resolution. Anything else, Kathleen?
Not from me.
All right, apologies that the meeting went longer, but I think it was productive discussion. So thank you all for
Mr.
that.
Chair, that's
Yes.
gonna happen on a regular basis with debates and stuff like that. So good meeting.
I appreciate you all being here. I guess one last question. Would you all prefer to have a standing meeting time each month? And is this a good time for that? Is the last Friday at 4 p.m.
Yes, that works for me.
generally workable? Okay. Representative Best, is that agreeable to you?
Yep.
And Vice President Patterson?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll use that as our baseline then, and get the rest of our meetings set from there. So thank you all.
Thank
I
you.
think we
Have a
have
good
to
weekend.
Take care.
officially adjourn. Yeah,
Thank you.
everyone have a good weekend.
You too.
Thanks.